Republican leader Mitch McConnell made rare appearances at the panel.
But we all learned early in life, if you can write the rules, you can win the game.
The For the People Act would set early voting requirements, automatically register voters, and set new campaign finance rules. Republicans argue it's a partisan takeover of elections.
Fox's Jared Halperin at the Capitol. No gas signs hanging from the pumps in hundreds of gas stations in the east and southeast. The Biden administration says there would be enough gas except for panic buying. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm says the Colonial Pipeline hopes to restore operations over the weekend, but admits
it will take a few days to ramp up operations. This pipeline has never been shut down before.
Still unclear whether the company has agreed to pay the ransom demanded by hackers or if they're working around it. Secretary of Homeland Security urging private companies to improve their cybersecurity. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Violence on both sides in Gaza Thursday. Hamas launching rocket attacks on Tel Aviv. Israel responding with airstrikes, which they say killed several top Hamas commanders. The UN Special Coordinator warns unless there's a de-escalation, the region could be headed for all-out war. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham telling Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum this will be a test for the Biden administration.
This didn't happen during Trump years because Trump would have not put up with this. So the question to be answered, will Israel go in on the ground to clear out this problem like they did in 2014? I hope they don't have to, but if they have to, I will certainly have their back.
Customs and Border Protection reports more migrants crossing the southern border in April, up 3% from March's numbers, which were the highest in 2 decades. The number of unaccompanied children, however, did drop slightly. Connecticut and Vermont making plans for vaccination clinics for 12 to 15-year-olds in just days from now, as the CDC signs off on the FDA's approval of the Pfizer vaccine for younger patients. Oregon's Governor Kate Brown says when 70% of the people in her state older than 16 get at least one dose, statewide restrictions will start lifting, except possibly for masks and physical distancing. As the curtain lowers on the outbreak, they'll be trotting the boards again on the Great White Way in a few months.
3 of Broadway's biggest musicals, Hamilton, Wicked, and The Lion King, say they will be back on stage in September. They join dozens of other shows that plan to reopen on Broadway following an 18-month pandemic-induced shutdown. Disney's Aladdin also announcing dates for late September and October. And MJ, a new musical about Michael Jackson, will open early next year. In New York, Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's a good way to start the show, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, it ought to be good. I've done it for, 4 years now, I think? Something like that. Having a little trouble getting my camera.
You're 80 years old, Bob. You've done it for 75.
I suppose, yeah. Having a little difficulty getting my camera properly adjusted here. There we go. All right, so let's start out with Jemmy Ikutny. And it's another one of those editorials that, gives you information. It's not exciting. It doesn't have any punch. It doesn't have a punchline. Kind of makes you wonder why you spent a lot of time reading it, but it talks about opportunity is waiting with free job training. And it tells about all the free job training that's available at places like GCC, and it talks about the truck driving boot camp, etc. So it's one of those days, I think, when the editorial, whoever writes the editorial, sat down and said, man, I really got writer's block today. I gotta think of something. Hey, Herman, I gotta write. What could I write about? I'd write something about that truck driver's boot camp. Yeah, thanks, Herman. I think it's one of those kind of editorials. Yeah, so much for that. And then we go to the Post with so much to write about. It's amazing that editorial writers don't find things that are more exciting.
They're into recycling.
Yeah, recycling the same old topics, yeah. There were a series of meetings and press conferences Tuesday, some already planned, but no doubt made more urgent with the news that the next few days, Guam will be receiving $553.6 million from the American Rescue Plan. The amount initially was anticipated to be more than $600 million. Estimates ran from $630 to $660 million. Guam senators had come up with a list of priorities at the invitation of the governor on how the money is to be spent. Representatives of the two branches met behind closed doors at Antelope on Tuesday. Now, are you listening, editorial writers? Your editorial should take off from there. That's the news. You know, we can read about $553 million anywhere. Guidance from the Treasury Department sent Tuesday regarding the American Rescue Plan is clear. It can be used to support households and small businesses, impacted industries, essential workers, and the communities hardest hit by the crisis. The governor, after the meeting, said she supports the RISE Act and would like to expand it so it benefits all residents within a certain income bracket. The hesitation on the part of the governor and others has been, and seems to continue to be, the perceived unfairness in paying only private sector employees and not government employees the additional help. The perceived unfairness. Now, this is the governor who is really devoted to fairness, because when she said she was talking about self-determination, she said she only wants to work with native inhabitants. A great grounding in fairness there. Yeah.
Sounds fair to me.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Actually, two things we want to point out about the RISE Act. One, the pandemic didn't treat everyone fairly. Government employees never lost a paycheck, not a sliver of it, because of the pandemic. In fact, hundreds of GovGuam employees were working in the field received for at least a limited amount of time hazardous pay or differential pay. The latter went up to as much as 25% of their salary. Governor got to treat them fairly, too. No! By comparison, many private sector employees lost their job, and just to make the point, 25% of zero is zero. Many of those who managed to hang on to their jobs were only working and earning a fraction of the amount they used to. This is because businesses were shut down because of the public health concerns, and many are now still operating at reduced levels because of the pandemic. 2, the RISE Act doesn't pay every single private sector worker. So the argument that only private sector employees get it and not GovGuam employees, 2, doesn't fly. Eligibility is limited to individuals making less than $40,000 in adjusted income per year, or less than $80,000 in the case of joint filers for those who filed return income tax as you were returns in income tax year 2020. Elected officials need to focus on the intent of the law to help those who are most in need. The RISE Act offers eligible individuals a one-time payment of $800 or $1,600 for joint filers. With the pandemic unemployment assistance program coming to an end in a few months and thousands of Guamanians still out of a job, it's important that we use the money we did get to help as many as it possible as it relates to the pandemic. Not only were many of our island's private sectors hard hit, many to the point of several senators provided essential services throughout the pandemic when there were no vaccines, when Wuhan virus cases were skyrocketing and the number of hospitalizations was at an all-time high. These folks were working at gas stations, selling their farm-harvested foods, ringing your groceries up at the cash register, or helping you with some other need. And many did it with just a face mask and 6 feet of distance. The governor has said she's willing to do it, and it seems she and the senators have included it on the list of their priorities. Treasury also stated that local governments that receive these funds have broad flexibility to decide how best to use this funding to meet the needs of their communities. All that's left now is to make it happen and help those on our island who are in need. Yeah, I'm just dumbfounded by the governor's sense of fairness. You know, we had a situation in the beginning of the Wuhan virus pandemic where government employees were staying home and still getting paid, and where non-government employees were staying home because they were laid off and weren't getting paid. Then we had government employees who actually went to work and of course, were still getting paid. And we almost had a riot at the legislature with senators tripping over each other to give them double pay. Fortunately, we came to our senses on that one, but the governor, as the editorial said, had this special pay for people that were working. So as usual, the government employees made out very, very well. They didn't lose a nickel during the pandemic, and many of them made more than normal. And we have the poor fish who got laid off and didn't make anything, and the governor, well, you know, we've got to treat everybody fairly. I don't like the idea of excluding the government employees because, you know, they're a pretty substantial voting bloc. There are 11,000 of them, and they're next to Canada, et cetera. That's a really substantial voting bloc, and I want them to know that I'm bending over backwards for them so they'll vote for me in 2022. The other ones, well, you know, I can't identify them as a solid block. So, sorry about that.
And I can't hire everyone as a special assistant.
Yes, as much as I'd like to, I can't hire them all as special assistants. So, once again, Governor, here's for you and your sense of fairness. Boo! Did I make myself clear, Jose? All right, let's go to the... Yeah. You don't have a hiss on your sound effects there, do you?
No, but I think one's in order.
Yes, indeed. Boo, hiss. All right, here's the card for today. You were prescient, Jose. We start out with the governor versus Hattick Gate. The Hattick Gate scandal continues. And then we've got the 36th Guam legislature versus the open government law. And probably I'm going to have to add in the news media versus the open government law, because they don't recognize the story when it jumps up and bites them in the nose. And then we have a new player here. We've got Red Flag Carlotta. You know, Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco. Well, we have Red Flag Carlotta Leon Guerrero, formerly known as Carlotta Leon Guerrero, versus the open government law, being woke versus being smart, etc. And then we've got Grijalvo, Representative Grijalvo of Arizona versus Guam, and then Ben Shapiro versus Wokesters and BLM versus the United States, if we get to it. So let's start out with, what did I do with, did I forget to bring my Hattick Gate story along? Horror of horrors. Yeah, I'm going to have to get my Hattick Gate story. Jose, can I borrow your papers? I forgot to bring that story along, and I don't want to let it go until tomorrow. Thank you. Yeah, wait a second here. Yeah, one of my online assistants here found it for me.
What publication is it in?
Post. I couldn't find it in the Post. Yeah, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero is still vetting candidates to lead the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Jack Hattick, the former CLTC administrative director, resigned from the agency on May 7, leaving behind some controversies in addition to a vacant seat. He was then hired to work as a staff assistant in the office of the governor. On Tuesday, Leon Guerrero described Hattick's new role as a, quote, project manager, tasked with informing her on the progress of various major projects as the island proceeds with recovery. As I start reopening and start bringing more revitalization and better services, we're going to be doing a lot of projects, the governor said. There's the hospital project. There's the public health laboratory projects. There's the Fisherman's Co-op project. There's the prison project. You know, all these. I want Jack to be my assistant in just going through all these programs, projects, task force meetings, and reporting straight to me what he thinks the progress is. I want him to write out reports And if I don't like the report, I'll give it back to him and he can add something to it. Leanne Guerrero said Haddock has some prior experience with such a role. Boy, does he.
Don't say.
He resigned from the CLTC shortly after the commission announced it did not believe he was suited to lead the agency. That announcement came about 2 months after the commission meeting in February, in which a land agent said Haddock coerced her into including an illegal land application swap in a report to the commission. Haddock stated he did not force her to make changes, but he added his own recommendations to the report, which I was on like a duck on a June bug. In response, the CLTC chairman interviewed staff and developed a report which the commission discussed during a closed session in March. Then came the closed meeting in April and the subsequent announcement on Haddock. Senator Joanne Brown had called for an investigation into Haddock, stating that he appears that he committed forgery. This week, she called for an oversight hearing of the CLTC. The commission has taken action to what appears to be a cover-up, what could potentially be forgery against the land trust program itself. The land trust recipients and the people deserve answers with regard to this issue, Brown stated in a release. Even with the resignation of Haddock as the land administrator, what has not been addressed by the commission is the issue of forgery and if other documents may have been forged by Haddock. Brown submitted a disclosure request for land agent reports and packets provided in the February CLTC meeting. The CLTC chairman responded that only one set of staff reports was submitted. But Brown said she is led to question whether it was the only one and if other reports were withheld from the commission or altered by Haddock. So, yeah, if this isn't a cover-up, it ought to be, because the governor is going to be treated like it is a cover-up. So you had Haddock, who in fact confessed to what it looked like to me forgery in front of a public meeting of the Land Trust Commission. The Land Trust Commission adjourned on the spot. They didn't entertain any more business. The next meeting, John Regis Jr., the chairman, said he was going to, he wouldn't use the word investigate. He was going to talk to the land agents and develop a report. He did his report and discuss it with the commissioners, but he will not release his report. So we don't know what's in his report. Probably a couple of smoking guns. So then, the next meeting after that, he said, well, I've talked to the land agents, everything's fine, we're going forward. Then the meeting after that, he says, Haddock is not suitable for this position. I'm going to talk to the governor. Kind of like, I'm going to talk to the governor because we don't want to open this can of worms here. So he talks to the governor waves her magic wand. And all of a sudden, Haddock follows the yellow brick road to Oz and winds up working for the governor, who, as you heard in the release, is now going to keep her informed about projects. Well, how about the project of leasing that land that over 4,000 people have been waiting for since 1995? Wouldn't that be a good project, Governor? And how is Jack Haddock going to help you there? Will he arrange the swaps in the line of people that have been waiting for so long? So in order to keep the lid on things, and the governor picks him up out of the land trust, pulls him out of a disgraceful situation, gives him what appears to be a position of trust in her office, and wants us to think, well, everything is fine now. We're all okay. Boo again. You know, a dedication to meritocracy, Governor. Always look for the best person for the job. But don't look too hard if there are other things that you could do instead. Okay, next item on the card is the 36th Guam legislature versus the open government law. Yeah, now we had a story that came out yesterday. Senators submit spending list ahead of meeting with governor. And this is what it starts out. The $664 million meeting is all set for tomorrow between Governor Lulian Guerrero and the legislature. Senators have submitted their spending wish list for the governor's discretionary federal relief funding and will make their pitch during a closed-door meeting at Adelup. Closed-door meeting. Is that a red flag? Is that a flare going off? No.
It's like the, what is that, Borealis?
Yeah, the Aurora Borealis, yeah, the Northern Lights, yeah. Yeah, now there was a time when we had reporters that worked for the newspapers here who would have gone to Adelup, who would have planted themselves in that conference room and said, I'm a reporter, I'm not leaving unless you force me out of here. We used to have that kind of thing. Now we have Nestor Lecanto, who, they'll make their pitch during a closed-door meeting in Adelup, and it talks about the bulk of the spending and everything. Completely misses the story.
It's like they waited outside for the morsels to be thrown to them.
I suspect they did. Hanging around outside saying, gee, I wonder what's going on in there. Gosh, I wonder how long it'll last. I've got a dental appointment. Yeah. So then we have Senator Brown, who's the only one apparently who understands that being a senator is not a private undertaking. It's a public position. And Brown protested. She said, she says, a secret session meeting today, and she said she's not going to go. She says, the senator said she will not condone such activities by attending them because compliance with the open government law is not optional, and providing adequate notice and public access to legislative session meetings is required by law. This is simply not a legislative caucus meeting, nor is it a chance meeting. It's a planned meeting to discuss and deliberate on spending of American Rescue Plan funds, etc. And this story quotes 5 GCA 108105, and here's the key part of that section. It says, no chance meeting, informal assemblage, or electronic communication shall be used to decide or deliberate public business in circumvention of the spirit or requirements of this chapter. Did they deliberate? Even the reporters got that right. They didn't all go in there and just pass notes around to one another or send each other WhatsApps. They actually deliberated. So that's what the law says. You can't do it. You can't get together with other members of a board, commission, or legislature and deliberate on public business. And then when the statute talks in terms of the spirit of the law, the spirit of the law is set forth in 5 GCA section 8102. The legislature declares it as a policy of this territory that the formation of public policy and decisions is public and shall not be conducted in secret. Now, the fact that there was a meeting was not secret, but they conducted their discussions in secret because no one else could come in. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created. You know, I've never seen anything like this. Once again, this is a time of, gosh, I've never seen something like this before, where the legislature would attempt to hold, you know, all 15 of them to this illegal meeting.
They're not even pretending.
And not even pretending. And then such a weak response from the media. Here's what the Post, who I think usually does a pretty good job. Here's what the Post said: closed door meeting on upcoming federal bailout called, quote, historical. Well, it's historical, all right. Yes, it's like Typhoon Karen was historical.
And just about hysterical.
Details and specifics will need to be finalized, but lawmakers and the governor appear to be mostly on the same, appear. Now, how do you know? I don't remember who wrote this story, but there's nothing apparent here, because appear means it looks like, and you didn't see anything. It says appear to be mostly on the same page over how to spend an impending $603 million federal bailout. A closed-door meeting was held with 14 senators and the administration for about an hour to discuss spending priorities for the subsidy. When all was said and done, many in the room shared their positive receptions. Quote, "It's an awakening for me. This is how we should work together," Governor Leon Guerrero said at the post-meeting press avail. This is how we should work together. Lock the doors. Keep the reporters out. Pay no attention to those people out there called the public. They don't mean anything. Today, I think we really demonstrated a historical event. And this time, I agree with her. This was really historical. The fact that they would have the chutzpah to do something like this. But, of course, the lamestream media here on the island let it get away with it. But it was a good media opportunity for the governor. It's Hackabotan all over again. I'm excited for the people. We agreed that all of this is an investment in our children and in their future, and that our island can really move forward. Oh, man. I got to take a break here. This is so inspiring, you know. And we want to take that opportunity. This is Speaker Tetlahi. I think everyone in the room kind of felt good about that agreement that we had all come to. I'm very much looking forward to the details. I'm very much looking forward to you acting like the Speaker of the Legislature, Therese Terlahi, going into a closed-door meeting. The governor shared some of her broad plans for the money with the media Tuesday. The federal funds will be spent on economic recovery to protect health and safety, the recovery of lost revenue, and to expand government services. As soon as the funds are given to the local government, the administration is able to begin spending most of it, according to the governor. My understanding is that they gave us a letter saying that we've been approved and we have submitted a claim of that to be approval to the U.S. Treasury for one of the elements, the governor said, clarifying that the approval has been given for the lion's share of the upcoming federal subsidy, some $553 million of the $603 million that has been identified by the Treasury. But there were 2 points where Adelup and the legislature differ. Okay, let's take a short break here, and we'll come back to the private legislature.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76circlekguam.com.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so we're back to the secret meeting held at the governor's office with 14 senators, 14 scofflaws who don't want to comply with the open government law that's their own project, their own product. Okay, but there are 2 points where Adelupa and the legislature differ. They're okay with a secret meeting. They got past that part pretty good. A priority listing submitted by all 15 senators proposed to decrease an earmark for a new public hospital and health center from $300 million to $200 million. The governor said she still wants to maintain the higher figure. I told them that I would like to pursue the $300 million. So now I'm not in support of that number, but I'm certainly in support of their priority also for the hospital. Leanne Guerrero was confident that the capital expense, which will take about half of the bailout, is an allowable investment under the released federal guidance. It's very broad, anything that has been negatively impacted as a result of Wuhan virus. What is more negatively impacted as a result of the Wuhan virus in the hospital facility? Well, you're not making sense, Governor. The hospital was not negatively impacted. The hospital was a hospital before, during, and after. The walls didn't fall down. The air conditioning didn't stop working. This happens all the time. We don't need a pandemic for that. So no, the hospital was not impacted at all. And while she's in support of implementing a local aid program for private sector workers called the Recovery Income Support and Empowerment Act of 2020, also known as the RISE Act, the governor remains hesitant about funding a program that deems government workers ineligible for financial benefits. Poor babies. My whole thing there was, how do I make sure people feel they're being fairly treated throughout, right? Yeah, like you really care, Governor. Yeah. Like on the political status question, you only want to work with native inhabitants. Now, how are you going to make people feel that they're being fairly treated after a mouthful like that? You don't care if people are fairly treated or not. You are a crass politician and you want to give this money to government workers, even though they got through the pandemic. Some got through in better shape than they would have without the pandemic, the ones that drew the special pay, and nobody else got hurt because they didn't miss a nickel's worth of their paychecks. And she says, and so I would rather err on the more conservative and say if I can provide everyone based maybe on income, and we can move the income level up a little bit so more people become eligible, I would prefer to do it that way, the governor. Make it real, Joe Cruz. The governor said later, adding, I'm trying to see if I can incorporate it into what we already have and still meeting the law, but expanding it. Because I want to, I'm going to be Governor Leon Guerrero. And let me be clear on this, folks. I never let an opportunity to pander to the government employees go by, and I'm certainly not going to start now. Leon Guerrero called the conversation productive, collegiate, and cooperative. You know, if we could just keep the public and the reporters out, the government will work so much better. We learned something here. Noting that this was the first time in her administration she was able to work with both the Democrat and Republican caucuses in the legislature. It worked pretty well with the Democrats up until now.
I guess because the public wasn't meddling in her affairs.
Exactly, yeah. We all decided that it is best to speak in one unified voice as public officials, one unified whispered voice as public officials, so we can show the people of Guam that in times that are very necessary to work together, we step up to the plate and have a unified, muffled voice. Yeah. Senator Chris Duenas, who leads the Republican minority, had similar thoughts. Come on, Chris. Secret meetings? Closed-door meetings? I think Chris was in the closed-door meeting with the two senators when we almost blew the whole military buildup. Were you here for that, Jose?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I just want to say 888-8255.
Yeah. Really, yeah. Yeah, we entertain the public here. We don't shun them. Essentially, the governor said that she agreed with our submission. She was actually quite pleased with what we had put forward and basically aligned with a lot of the priorities of the administration. A detailed proposal, much like the administration submitted for previous federal stimulus laws, will be given to the lawmakers in coming weeks, according to the senators, but the people are not going to be able to see it. They have no business meddling in legislative business. We agreed, not just in concept, but in reality, that these are various agency services. These are the various entities that have lost revenues, and we will recoup those lost revenues to our agencies via our budget plan. One senator didn't attend the meeting, which he referred to as a secret legislative session meeting. And she's right. Senator Brown protested the meeting, saying the meeting should have been public. With the exception of legislative caucuses, everything that the legislature does should be held in public. The legislature should never meet, deliberate, or decide public business in secret. It's when these types of secret meetings are held, corruption thrives. I will not condone such activities by attending them, Brown said. And I gave you some examples. I speculated on how that could work if there's no one from the outside, if it's all senators and one governor. All senators except for Brown, they wouldn't try it if she's there. She ran on a platform of fighting corruption. Sunshine is a really good antidote to corruption. Let the sunshine in. Let the light in. Let people see what's going on. And you wouldn't have a situation like the one I hypothesized yesterday, where the governor says, well, who do you guys want to take care of with contracts? Okay, yeah, all right. I got one for him, so you don't need to do that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. We'll write that down. Okay. Is everybody everybody covered here who needs a contract so that we can we work this money around so we can take care of these folks? Yeah. Anybody want to fatten up a particular agency to hire your kunyao? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what you're inviting when you don't let the public inside. I don't know what happened in there. And when you don't let the public inside, you allow crackpots like me to get into this kind of speculation because we can't see, we don't know, and we expect the worst. And ordinarily when we expect the worst, we're not disappointed.
You know what? After a report is written from this meeting, she says, don't worry, I have someone who knows how to put his own recommendations in.
Yeah. Right.
It's a special project manager.
Yeah, exactly. Jack is really good at openness and report writing, especially.
Here's a devil's advocate. I don't know if you're going to cover this.
We don't allow the devil in here.
Here's my advocacy.
The devil doesn't need our help. Go ahead.
No, he doesn't. Because we're still in a health emergency, and she did away with the open government law at Adelup. I'm considering that a sovereign country now. Because it occurred on Adelup, were the legislatures, not the legislature, but diplomats?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's something for lawyers to fight about here, that's for sure. And you know, the way the law works, it's hard to enforce something against the legislature because of the so-called speech and debate clause. They have a particular, it's not exactly an immunity, it's more like a privilege where they are able to do things that ordinary bodies wouldn't be able to do. But the fact that they can do something doesn't mean that they should do something. And they should be the most stringent adherents to the open government law because we look to them to set a good example, not a really poor example, which is exactly what they've done with their closed-door meeting. Once again, the statute, going back to the statute here, the legislature is a public agency when it's holding a daily session, but meetings of political caucuses composed of members of the legislature are not required to be conducted in public hearing. And a member, as you were, no chance meeting, informal assemblage, or electronic communication shall be used to deliberate public business. So if they deliberated public business, which they did, right? And if this was not a session of the legislature, then they violated the law. If it was a legislative session, they violated the law because they didn't open it up to the public. So either way, they're screwed. The law does not accommodate what they did. Now, I read the policy of the law on more than one occasion, and I agree 100%. I don't want them to decide for me what I ought to know and what I shouldn't know. Who went to that meeting? Who went along with the governor? Who didn't? Who was the springbutt? All of those things are important. And this is a travesty. You know, everybody likes to get the D word out and bat it around. Democracy. Well, this is a black mark on democracy on our island because those who we elected through a democratic process gave us the finger, is what it amounts to. If I were a cartoonist, you would see a rough drawing of Adelup and the door to the conference room and a sign on the door that said private meetings, senators only, and the door would be open a crack, and a hand with a middle finger extended would be sticking out of the door, because that's exactly what our legislators did. They gave us the finger. Okay, let's take a short break here, and I'm not quite finished with our legislature.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Yeah, okay, so, you know, a really black mark on our democratic government here. The kind of thing, the word star chamber comes forward. You know, we had a star chamber proceeding at Adelup. So, you know, this is the way tyrannical governments operate. They don't want you to know how they make decisions. So they'll make a decision in private and then come out and brag about it and tell you what a wonderful job they're doing for you. I'm very disappointed in Chris Duenas, who's the minority leader of the Republicans. Democrats, you know, like I say, I expect this from Democrats. I'd be surprised if they didn't do something like this. I have much higher expectations for Republicans that they would not get involved in closed-door government. Now that we've done it, and they've clearly gotten away with it, because other than Senator Brown and tall tales, nobody seems to want to hold them to account. Is it going to become a habit? Every time we have an issue that's a little bit sticky, hard to handle, well, we're not going to go into session because the governor's, she's so wonderful. She's invited us all down to Adelup. So we're going to have a closed-door meeting with her, and we'll work through this. And then after we've done that, we'll tell the reporters, and we'll let you know. Can we walk? Oh, no. This is a closed-door meeting. So over at the legislature, Therese July, you put out a calendar of events for the legislature. I suggest you add a second calendar, a calendar of events for closed-door meetings at the governor's office, because that seems to be the preferred way for a deliberative body known as the 36th Guam Legislature to conduct his business. Closed-door meeting at Adelup. Very, very bad show. Very disappointing. And 3 cheers. Let's have a big cheer for Senator Brown. Yeah, and the Daily News picked it up too. Governor says legislative priorities in line with her administration. Senators of the 36th Guam Legislature are in line with Governor Leon Guerrero. They both agree that the closed-door meeting is far superior to doing things according to law. A comprehensive bipartisan list of priorities was drafted and presented to the governor prior to the meeting. According to her, the aims of the legislature and her administration matched up. So we're finding out now what the legislature did from their spokesman. According to her, we're finding out from their spokesman, Lou Leon Guerrero. That's wonderful government, folks. Their priorities were very much aligned with our strategic path and our strategic agenda to help bring back the recovery of our island, to continue to protect this, blah, blah, blah. One priority that came up was the implementation of the RISE Act. According to the governor, she was in agreement with the goal of providing support to individuals in need, but was looking into incorporating payments into existing structures and expanding the program. Quote, I would rather err in the more conservative side and say if I can provide for everyone based maybe on income, etc., I'd prefer to do it that way. So the governor got good press out of this. Another way was the recovery of lost revenues in the area of government to continue to provide adequate services for Guam residents. We are seeing within the government agencies shortfalls, etc. Then they finally got down to the real story here, which they treat as an afterthought. Senator Brown did not attend the meeting in protest. The legislature should never meet, deliberate, or decide public business in secret. It's the same quote that the other paper ran.
How is following the law a protest?
Yeah.
I protested stealing from the store the other day.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right.
I went into the store and I found the manager and I said, I protest. I don't care what you say. I'm not going to shoplift in your store. I don't care how much security you got out here.
I protest every day.
Okay, the story goes on to say the meeting was a closed-door session at Adelup. There were a series of meetings and press conferences Tuesday, some already planned, but no doubt made more. Wait a minute, that's a different story. Yeah, the meeting was a closed-door session at Adelup, and that's the end of the story. So this would have been a great place for an editorial, a wonderful place for an editorial. Don't treat us like mushrooms. Keep us in the dark and feed us you know what, because that's what you're doing here. You're treating us like mushrooms. So Democrats, suspicions confirmed. You don't care about the people. You're not interested in good government. You're interested in perpetuating your seats in the legislature. Republicans, shame on you. We have much higher expectations from you than to go along with this half-brained scheme of a secret meeting to, quote, work with the governor. And you let the governor be your spokesman. You know, it isn't even media savvy to let the governor be the one who does your messaging for you. Bad, bad, bad.
Apparently, we have a living organic act that allowed the two branches to merge together as one.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe the best argument we ever had for a part-time legislature, we don't even need 15. You know, just have a room about the size of the studio here, and we can get by with 3, so long as they met with the governor. And so long as the door was securable, so long as we could keep the door closed. All right, just one right after another. Today we've got Red Flag Carlotta in a story in the Daily News. The headline, "A Giant Red Flag. More questions the government's transparency in handling base burials." Story that I covered yesterday. Some residents are increasingly frustrated at the lack of transparency from the local and federal governments after a series of emails showed that the Guam State Historic Preservation Office sought the military's perspective before releasing information of burials at Camp Blas. Even Anamita's pulling her punches here. She didn't seek their perspective. She was looking either for their advice or their permission, one of the two. Quote, "This whole buildup, it's been very difficult to get open and clear communications. It's definitely an ongoing theme," said university student Tristan Quintanilla. "It's very undemocratic that these things aren't being discussed." All right, let's break for the halftime show, and I'll come back to Red Flag Carlotta.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
It's not a gas shortage. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, says Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm.
It's that we have this supply crunch and that things will be back to normal soon, and that we're asking people not to hoard.
But with the Colonial Pipeline still in the grips of ransomware hackers, people are filling up and topping off.
More than 7% of Virginia's gas stations have run out of fuel, with North Carolina and Georgia also facing shortages. The governors of Virginia and North Carolina have declared a state of emergency.
And Fox's Jennifer Griffin reports now add Florida to that list, lifting restrictions on fuel transport. The Biden administration says the pipeline could be up over the weekend. House Republicans meet behind closed doors today. They'll likely vote to remove Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney from her GOP leadership post for breaking with former President Trump.
Our duty is clear. Every one of us who has sworn the oath must act to prevent the unraveling of our democracy. This is not about policy. This is not about partisanship.
Representative Cheney, speaking on the House floor yesterday, charging Mr. Trump has resumed an aggressive effort to convince Americans the election was stolen from him. Her GOP critics say Cheney is clouding the GOP's message. Congressional leaders will meet with President Biden today to try and find something to agree on.
President Biden is scheduled to meet with House Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer. And in a show of bipartisanship, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is supposed to be in attendance, as is House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, with a goal to find out what they can work together on. Infrastructure is a safe bet as far as topics go, but there's disagreement over how much money to spend and what falls under the definition of infrastructure. Ahead of this meeting, though, McConnell said all of his focus was on stopping President Biden's agenda.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Democrats began work Monday on the For the People Act, a massive election reform bill in the Senate.
Democrats are pushing forward with a sweeping voting bill in the Senate to federalize the nation's elections. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer blasted Republican opposition to the legislation.
If you choose the path of uncompromising opposition, you will cast yourself in league with the most reprehensible, sweeping voter suppression effort in decades.
McConnell told lawmakers Democrats are attempting to make sure they stay in power.
We'll hear a lot of flowery language today, including my friend and colleague, the Majority Leader. But we all learned early in life, if you can write the rules, you can win the game.
In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Israel has stepped up its attacks on the Gaza Strip, flattening a building used by Hamas and killing at least 3 militants. Palestinian rockets raining down almost nonstop yesterday on parts of Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing to expand the offensive, which is the heaviest fighting since 2014. An update on that mass shooting over the weekend that left 6 people dead at a child's birthday party. Police in Colorado Springs say the shooter was upset because he hadn't been invited to the party thrown by his girlfriend's family. 3 Army soldiers have been accused of gun running.
3 Fort Campbell soldiers are facing a host of charges stemming from a mass shooting in Chicago. DeMarcus Adams, Jarius Brunson, and Brandon Miller were not involved in that shooting, but they are accused of purchasing nearly 100 firearms outside their Army post in Kentucky and Tennessee, and then selling dozens of those weapons to individuals in Chicago. If convicted, the trio faces up to 20 years behind bars. Tom Graham, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
At Chili's, our burgers are flavorful works of art. Starting from inspiration, our handcrafted burgers are a collection of fresh ingredients put together on a toasted brioche bun. Choose from juicy, mouth-watering options like our Boss Burger, Ultimate Bacon Burger, or the new Chef Alex's Santa Fe Burger, loaded with avocado, Swiss cheese, fresh veggie, cilantro, and spicy Santa Fe sauce. Served with garlic dill pickles and fries. Treat yourself today and enjoy our juicy, yummy, handcrafted creations. Chili's is located on the second floor of the Tumont Sands Plaza. Chili's, savor the moment.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
So here we are, second half of Tall Tales. We had a good halftime show as usual. And now we are in the second half of Tall Tales. And guess what? I'm going straight back to Red Flag Carlotta. Yeah, and the Daily News article entitled, quote, "A Giant Red Flag. More question the government's transparency in handling base burials." There are 12 ancient burials at Camp Blas, the new Marine Corps base in Dededo. In early March, neither the military nor the Preservation Office were disclosing details, though both knew about the number of burials since at least September. Documents obtained from the military by the Pacific Daily News under the Freedom of Information Act showed weeks' worth of inquiries directed to the State Historic Preservation Office regarding the site were forwarded to Joint Region Marianas. Now that sentence is confusing. Documents obtained from the military by the Daily News showed weeks' worth of inquiries directed to the Guam State Historic Preservation Office regarding the site were forwarded to Joint Region Marianas. So they're saying, if you take this all apart, they got this information from JRM. They got these emails that were sent to JRM by the State Historic Preservation Office. You could probably orchestrate a closed session of the legislature here, Anamita, with this kind of writing style. Military advisors whose names were redacted from the emails provided by the military told the acting preservation officer at the time, Carlotta Leon Guerrero, quote, from a non-legal but practical standpoint to not disclose such information and to not let the media pull you along, as it's probably a waste of time. Okay, now the names were redacted from what was provided by the military, but the Vigilance Committee cheated. They sent a request straight to Carlotta Leon Guerrero, to Patrick Lujan. Carlotta denied the first time around. We don't have any of that thing like that. Then the second time around, we got an email from Randall Sablon of JRM. And it was the same one. The content was the same as the one that Anamita got from the military. So the military, as you were, Randall told Carlotta, from a non-legal but practical standpoint, to not disclose such information and to not let the media pull you along, as it's probably just a waste of time. Do you see a trend developing here? We don't need to let the media come into a legislative session. It's probably just a waste of time. And when the media sends us a sunshine law request, we don't need to answer it. It's probably just a waste of time. So if you're in government, what you need to have is a rubber stamp. And the words on the rubber stamp would say, just a waste of time. And these papers come in, just stamp them and give them to somebody to write back and say, no, yeah, it's just a waste of time. And don't let the media pull you along, as it's probably just a waste of time. Quintanilla, a Chamorro Studies and Political Science double major, said the public deserves to know what's happening throughout the base construction process. And once again, we got people really missing the story here, of course. These burials are immeasurable historical importance to us. The Chamorro, this just shows you how far down this road we've got. You've got a story where a government official is caught asking a military employee how to answer a FOIA request from a local reporter, right? Asking, after saying that, after telling everybody, we can't answer that because of federal law. And really what she's doing, she's just being the mouthpiece from Randall Sablon. So what does this university student seize on? What does she home in on? Quintanilla said, the fact that we're being kept out of the loop and being kept behind closed, as you were, going back a sentence, she said, these burials are of immeasurable historical importance to us. The Chamorro culture was ravaged through colonization. Yeah, so, if you can't engage in that kind of rhetoric, don't answer the question. And the fact that you're way off, you've missed the complete issue doesn't mean anything. The fact that we're being kept out of the loop and being kept behind closed doors is just allowing for the military to do whatever it wants. And Red Flag Carlotta is complicit here. What's your name? Let's see. Tristan Quintanilla. Tristan, you better wake up. We have no say, as you were. Got another contributor here. Oh, that's Tristan, I guess, is a male. Of course, we don't know nowadays. They, right? We're isolated from those remains, from those artifacts. The land was taken without our consent. This land was disturbed without our consent. There is immeasurable value in these remains, and disrespect in having them disturbed in any way. And from an anthropological view, they have an immeasurable ability to teach us about our own history. So Anamita comes through again.
She already had the story written. She just had to plug in.
Yeah. So, it's always the same rap. It's always the critical race theory approach to things. Colonizer bad. etc., skipping over the fact that she was fababad by Carlotta Leon Guerrero. Carlotta pulled the wool over your eyes, Anamita. She was untruthful to you. All right, then we go on to Historic Preservation Officer Patrick Lujan said the public records would have been told, as you were, the public would have been told in due time. Yeah, I guess he isn't very familiar with our open government law and with our sunshine law. Lujan signed the agreement dictating how the burials would be handled with Joint Region Marianas in September 2020, which was about 6 months before the public knew that the number of burials at Camp Blas grew to 12. At the time, the public was informed that 4 burials existed at Sabanan Fadang site on base. Quote, the military is still not done with the final report. I see a grand presentation from them in regard to this, a holistic view. When people talk about a holistic view and stakeholders, be careful, because those
catchphrases.
Yeah, those should cause your BS detector to start alarming. One particular burial, the particular burial, but a grand presentation is meant for the public, will explain everything, Lujan said, including why Carlotta was so cozy with Randall Sablon and let him dictate how she would handle a FOIA request. Maybe we'll get some common sense from Dave Lotz. He's got lots to say about things like this. According to historian Dave Lotz, this is not sufficient. The Preservation Office should be getting that information, demanding it from the military, and releasing it to the public. Well, Dave, they had the information. It's just that the military told Carlotta not to release it. Don't let them pull you around. It's a waste of time. Government of Guam officials should be transparent. They should readily make information available. But also waiting for a final report? When's that going to happen? Oh, we got Teresa Laguana, a Mong Toto resident, said she is fed up with how both the military and local government are negotiating the situation and leaving the public out along the way. And back to Anamita again and her standard treatment of stories like this. It's disturbing your grandparents' bones. I feel pain and anger, but also deep sadness. Some of our people are so lost, including some who are in these positions of power, seeking guidance from the ones who are doing the desecration to navigate our ancestral remains. That's obviously a giant red flag.
Wrong flag.
I'm so angry with how this whole thing has been unfolding. Even our own government hides things from us. That's the story. You know, bash the military, but it's not the military, it's red flag Carlotta. How can we be expected to believe or trust either of them and what they allow us to know about? Well, this lady's kind of got the point. This is one big obvious example of why we need to decolonize. If you decolonize, do you think Carlotta would be any different? Leon Guerrero said Monday that residents, and here's the real insult. You know, Leon Guerrero got caught red-handed, and I'm going to go back again to what I think is a smoking gun. It's an email chain from Patrick Lujan in response to a sunshine request from the Vigilance Committee. See the following email traffic. And there's an email from Carlotta to Michelle Yamasta. Hi guys, I did a search and I found this in response to Lee Weber's latest email. Please include it when working with Jessica on the FOIA response. Carlotta. Jessica is the lawyer, Jessica Toff. To Jessica, here it is. To Carlotta. Carlotta, these are operative citations. This is from Randall Sablon. He gives her a citation 54 USC 307-103, which is exactly what what Carlotta gave to you, Anamita, and told you that was the reason she couldn't talk to you about this matter. From a non-legal but practical standpoint to me, you cannot disclose to the media the type of blanket information PDN is requesting. So Randall Sablon from the GRM tells Carlotta, our SHPO, that as a practical, but not illegal, but as a practical matter, you can't disclose this information to the Daily News. And then he goes on to say, honestly, I think you have shared adequately to date, and we can look to sharing additional appropriate information when the report is final. Here's a punchline. Please don't let the media pull you along, as it's probably just a waste of time. PDN can do their own legal research and then decide their next move. Jessica can give you the few sentences for the written response. So who is the speechwriter for Carlotta Leon Guerrero? Randall Sablon. Who is the PIO for Carlotta Leon Guerrero? Randall Sablon. and, you know, there's a red flag here, Anamita, but I don't know, maybe Anamita's colorblind. You know, colorblind people can't distinguish between red and green. Maybe Anamita is colorblind. She didn't see the red flag when it was right in front of her. And I saw when the Vigilance Committee got this, they copied her in on the information with Randall Sablon's email in it.
But she got the redacted version.
She got the redacted, which it's kind of like an anonymous complaint. There are two versions, the redacted and the unredacted. Which one you go? Oh, you go with the redacted one, because obviously these people don't want you to know who they are. a really, really sad performance here on someone close to Governor Leon Guerrero, someone that we should be able to depend on to not play games with us. If you're going to work with Randall Sablon, be upfront about it. But she didn't. She came out and said, I can't give you this because there's a federal statute. As though she was doing this, as I would say, on her own hook. She had looked up the statute, etc. Bad. You know, this...
Is Mr. Sablon a federal employee?
Yeah.
Federal employee.
Yeah, Joint Region Marianas. That's where he works. And I've got his title here. He's got his title is almost as long as his email. Randall L. Sablon, J00PM-GS15. Advisor, Political, Military, and Regional Environmental Affairs Advisor, Indo-PACCOM Senior Military Official, Joint Region Marianas Office, and his phone number here. Yeah. So we don't need no stinking SHPO. We'll just let Randall do this for us.
You have an interview, Amita. Amita, is that her name?
Anamita.
Anamita.
Anamita Carr. And for Anamita, it's always the same nationalist separatist pitch. Like, she had to go out and find a couple people to interview. Otherwise, the story would have been about the smoking gun.
I think she has a booth at UOG.
Yeah, right. I got Paul from Boston. Paul, I'll take you after I go to Churchill Downs, if I have time. You're not coming to Guam. It's not on the card. I hope that doesn't make you feel too bad. Okay, next on the card is Grijalvo versus Guam. And this ran PNC today. This Wednesday, Congress will hold an historic first ever congressional hearing focused exclusively on the Insular cases. Now, you want to know why Congress never held a hearing on this before? Because it's not the kind of thing that you hold a hearing on. If you don't like a Supreme Court decision, then the only thing that you could do if you're in Congress is you could study the decision, and perhaps you could introduce a bill to ameliorate, go around, etc., the decision. If the decision is based on what's called statutory construction, based on the interpretation of a federal statute, that's what you do, Congressman Grijalvo. If it's a constitutional question, you can't touch it from the Congress. That's why this is an historic hearing, because it makes no sense, none whatsoever. A series of Supreme Court cases grounded in racial discrimination. And, you know, it's a lot easier to believe a lie you've heard 1,000 times than a fact that you've never heard before. And everybody, by now, thanks to Ann Hattori, everybody knows that the Insular cases were racist. Everybody but me, who took the time to read the signature Insular case known as Downs versus Bidwell, and I can tell you it is not racist. No! And I've spent a fair amount of time on the air going through it, parsing it, and showing you that it's not racist. But it's so much more fun to talk in terms of, well, it's racist. And it's the argument for argument. I mean, it's the anchor for arguments, like Tina's Navy bashing argument in favor of her own penny ante resolution. The hearing will start with the House Natural Resources Committee considering House Resolution 279, which seeks to condemn the Insular cases as both contrary to the Constitution, a Supreme Court case interpreting the Constitution that's contrary to the Constitution, and for their racist underpinnings. Equally American's President Neil Weir is among the witnesses who have been invited to testify. Of course, you know, if you ever saw the movie Casablanca, you would understand when Inspector Reno was told of a crime, he said, go out and round up the usual suspects. That would be Neil Weir, the usual suspects. I think Neil drives around with a soapbox in his trunk, and every time he sees 3 or 4 people on a street corner, he gets out and starts preaching about what Pete Santos has repeated more than once, that Neil Weir has a savior complex. That Neil Weir brought suit in Utah on behalf of some people who were Samoans to secure birthright citizenship for them, even though the government of American Samoa said, we don't want that. That's not what we're after. But Neil whipped in there. He was the savior. So he's on the panel. And I'll get to the panel in a minute, but it's as crabbed as Tina's panel. Tina had her own panel that I went through yesterday for her resolution, and she was careful to make sure that she only put people on her panels who knew the right answer. She would never run the risk of putting some radical like me on the panel who had read both the Navy's 1899 to 1950 study and Downs versus Bidwell. Well, I'll come back to Grijalvo versus Guam. First, I got to stretch a little bit. Time for the 7th inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
There we are, Wrigley Field, world's most beautiful ballpark. Much prettier than the Green Monster out in left field. And
Now you're just rabble-rousing.
yeah, right. Well, I noticed that I caught Paul's attention with the word Casablanca. I love that movie. You know, movies used to be so good. Back in the day when movies had plot, theme, character development, setting, etc., instead of just a series of special effects and explosions. Yeah, those were the days.
And woke stories.
And woke stories, yeah. So Casablanca, I've probably seen it a dozen times, and if it popped up on Channel 39, I'd probably watch it again. And a little autobiographical information. I think it must have been about 10 years ago. I was in Casablanca. And I have to tell you, Casablanca is very disappointing. If you're going to go to Morocco, try Marrakesh or Tangier, but not Casablanca. Casablanca is a city of about 6 million people. It's just a large industrial city.
That's because Captain Renault took out all the casinos.
Exactly. But when I was there is a bar and restaurant called Rick's Club. It's not Rick's Club American, which is what it should be, but it's Rick's Club. And we went to Rick's, and they did the best that they could to kind of duplicate the atmosphere of Rick's bar in the movie. They even had a player piano, if you've ever seen a player, that would play as time goes by.
His name was Sam.
Yeah. So it wasn't worth going to Casablanca just for that. It was a fun place to go, and they sold pretty snazzy black T-shirts that said Rick's Club American, Casablanca, Morocco. And I really wanted to buy one until I found out how much. $35. I'm too Moschino to spend $35 on a $9.95 T-shirt, so I didn't buy one. Okay, back to Grijalva versus Guam. This story says, I applaud Chair Grijalva for holding this historic hearing, and I look forward to testifying in support of this bipartisan resolution, stated Neil Weir, president and founder of Equal American, who took the opportunity to do some righteousness preening. Equally American, which advocates for equality and civil rights for the 3.5 million American citizens living in U.S. territories. This resolution is an important step towards turning the page on the insular cases and the colonial framework they established. Well, I've been through this before, but if Grijalva, Raoult Grijalva, and Neil Weir got their wish, and the Supreme Court overruled Downs versus Bidwell and said we were wrong when we said that the Constitution did not apply in the territories ex proprio vigere, a Latin word that means of its own force. We were wrong when we made that decision in 1901. We've done some head scratching, looked through some really heavy books, and we've decided that we should overrule that case. We now hold that the United States Constitution does apply in the territories ex proprio vigere, of its own force. The Constitution applies. All of a sudden, you see this dark cloud blowing in from the ocean with bolts of lightning coming out of it. And if you got a soothsayer, he'd tell you, yeah, the reason is that now that the Constitution applies ex proprio vigere, the revenue clauses also apply. The uniformity clause, which says that all taxes, etc., have to be uniform throughout the several states. So that means no more mirror image Guam territorial income tax. We could have to send our taxes to Washington, to the Treasury. No more Section 30 money. No more GITA qualifying certificates. No more Freeport status. That's what would happen. That'd be a wonderful result, wouldn't it? Yeah. So this resolution is an important step towards turning the page on the insular cases and the colonial framework they established. Now, if you read Downs, you would agree with Weir. It does establish a colonial framework, and it even quotes a decision from Chief Justice John Marshall, who said that, you know, if you decide this way, it enables the creation of an American empire. I'm paraphrasing. That's what he said. Had Downs gone the other way, the United States could not have been an imperialist country. And I've been through this before. We live in a part of the American empire because we are able to hold territory outside of the mother country that is controlled by the mother country. There's no getting around that. And if you want to get on your soapbox and talk about that, fine. But I think it's important that if you get on that soapbox, you also talk about the downside of not being a colony anymore, which is what I just mentioned. And I would persuade you that my position is far more logical. What we ought to do is we ought to embrace our situation in the American empire. We should lobby to change those things that we can change. As an example, we could have a 903 commission like the Northern Marianas does. Or we could have a federal judge with life tenure. We could get parity on supplemental security income, welfare, all the rest of these things that Congress can do by statute. That's what we ought to be concentrating on, instead of sending Tina over there with a resolution that when counsel for Grijalvo's committee looks at it, it's going to say, this is what they sent to Washington? This is the best they can do? And these people want self-determination? Whoa. Grijalvo goes on to say, as you were, the House committee released the following statements from co-sponsors of H.R. 279. The insular cases belong to a very dark chapter of U.S. history when the doctrines of separate but equal and attitudes about racial inferiority explicitly defined the country's laws, said Natural Resources Committee Chair Raoult M. Grijalva. We cannot excuse this harmful past, but as legislators, we have an obligation to ensure that its legacy does not extend into the future. Well, how are you going to do that as legislators? The insular quote, the insular cases decided in 1901 by the same Supreme Court that upheld segregation laws have no place in modern-day America, Congressman Gregorio Kilili Sablan said. He's a fine one to complain, isn't he? Yeah. In these cases, the Supreme Court calls people living in the U.S. territories alien and savage and restless people. Wrong. wrong.
Where do they get this information?
I can't tell you on the air. You know,
Where do they pull this information from?
Yeah, it's from an orifice, but I can't name the orifice. Unless he read Tina's resolution.
Obviously.
Yeah, and pull it out of there. But that's just not what it does. There is a paragraph that talks about alien races, but it begins, and as I've explained in so many times, it begins with the word if. So it doesn't relate to the 4 islands that were prizes of war after the Spanish-American War. It relates to future territories that the imperial United States might want to grab. And, you know...
But it's like you said, where's the word savage in any of the insular cases, Senator?
Of course not. It's just not there. It's just not there. This is Kilili from
Saipan.
From Saipan, yeah.
Garcia Namai.
Yeah, alien and savage and restless people, antiquated notions of racial inferiority, and you won't find that in the insular cases either. In Downs, you won't find antiquated notions of racial inferiority. You find that in Grijalvo's statement. That should not be the basis of any contemporary court decisions. Well, maybe we should pack the court. Grijalvo, why don't you introduce a bill to add 6 more justices to the Supreme Court and talk to our folks over in the Senate and tell them don't confirm anybody to the Supreme Court who won't overrule Downs versus Bidwell. That would be the Democrat way of going about it, wouldn't it? Yeah. Our resolution recognizes these racist and imperialist assumptions for what they are. Boy. Yeah, for what they are. Alien, savage, and restless. I don't think you recognize them for what they are, Kilili, because I don't think you can read. Or else either you can't read or you can read too well because you're reading words that aren't there. Quote, the insular cases go well beyond the ability of citizens in the territories to vote. Wow. The insular cases have nothing to do with people in the territories voting. Congressman Stacey Plaskett, Democrat from the Virgin Islands, said, we pay billions of dollars in federal taxes. Wrong!
What?
Virgin Islands has the same mirror image that we do. The same taxation situation that we do.
The worst thing is that they just go ahead and print this junk.
Yeah. PNC just goes ahead and runs with it. There's no fact checking or no Pinocchios or whatever. So the Congressman or the senator from the Virgin Islands says we pay billions of dollars in federal taxes, and yet residents of U.S. territories are denied access to critical federal programs and support. Otherwise, eligible citizens in the territories are denied supplemental security income, leaving our most vulnerable seniors and disabled people to fend for themselves. Federal programs, including Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the Child Tax Credit, and the Earned Income Tax Credit are either capped or denied altogether. This discrimination against the residents of the territories must end now. Well, I made the same observation yesterday that I made today. Stacey, you are going to have the ear of Congressman Raul Grijalva. Everything that you mentioned here is a program established by Congress. And all of the exclusions that you're whining about were put in the statute by Congress. So just ask this hero, Raul Grijalva, to take those exceptions out so that people in the Virgin Islands and Guam get SNAP, child tax credit, EI, et cetera, et cetera. You know, a failing here of what we used to call ninth grade civics. People just don't understand how the government works. Here's a quote from, today is my day for disappointments. I'm disappointed in the Republicans. I'm disappointed in Mike St. Nicholas because I thought he would know better. These last vestiges of blatant racism and governance and interpretation of the law used today to validate the unequal treatment of Americans in territories are staring us in the face, daring us to bring them down. The question of our time is, will we blink? Unequal treatment of Americans in the territories. Yeah, we get to pay taxes to a local government. That's pretty unequal. And the folks in Washington have in D.C. have made a case out of that. They say, treat us like you treat Guam. We don't have representation in Congress, so don't make us pay federal taxes. Let us keep the federal taxes.
His soapbox is bigger than Neil's.
Really? So what we have here is representation without taxation. The hearing will include 2 panels of distinguished experts. Panel number 1, Representative Stacy Plaskett, Democrat, Virgin Islands, who no doubt will talk about income tax. Right? Panel number 2, invited witnesses, Daniel Emerwar, Professor, Department of History, Northwestern University, who wrote a book. I've read some of the book. It's called like America's Hidden Territories or something like that. Kind of like, hey, did you know that, you know, the United States has 5 territories?
Kind of like America's hidden words and documents.
Exactly. The second invited witness, Mr. Neil Weir, President, Equally American. Third person, Tina Munya Barnes, Vice Speaker, Guam Legislature. She'll stick up for the Chamorros. Professor Rose Quizon Villasor, Professor of Law and Chancellor's Social Justice Scholar, Rutgers University. Chancellor's Social Justice Scholar. Now there's quite a title. But she was the one that kind of got the insular cases right. Because she testified in Tina's resolution, she says, well, you know, because of the insular cases, we have that special land tenure rule in the Northern Marianas that we couldn't have otherwise. And we have the malapportioned upper house of a legislature. So she's probably the only one in the panel that actually read Downs versus Bidwell. Dr. Peter S. Watson, President and CEO of the Dwight Group, LLC, and former White House Director of Asian Affairs, National Security. Oh, high-powered dudes. Honorable Taluega Iliasalo Va Alele Ale, Lieutenant Governor, American Samoa. Now, he might not be able to get the right answer because everybody else on here was obviously chosen because Grijalva pretty well figured that they'd get the right answers. So I got to go to the Churchill Downs, right? All right, let me see who I'm going to talk to afterwards. Okay, after Churchill Downs, I'll squeeze Patrick in. I'm sorry, Paul in. I don't have time for Patrick today.
Dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, home stretch of tall tales for another day. I've still got a little bit more. I want to go back to Tina's poisonous resolution here, her poisonous resolution, 56. But since Paul's calling all the way from Boston, I'll give him a couple of minutes. Go ahead, Paul.
Bob, do you miss me so much?
Did you have anything to say, Paul, or you just want to make noise with your mouth?
No, I don't want to make noise. I tried to book a full vacation to Guam.
Oh.
And at the end of the day, it was going to cost me $10,000 to come there.
Guam's not for amateurs, Paul.
Well, amateurs. I'm not a wealthy man, but I'd like to take a vacation. And $10,000 is a little bit rich for my blood. So, are you guys not? You don't want tourists to come and visit there, or that's my question: is do you not want people to come visit?
I think you are making a connection between two unrelated subjects. We have nothing to do with setting airfares here, and I'm trying to figure out how one would come up with a $10,000 airfare. First of all, you'd have to go to the airport and say, I want a ticket today, because no advance.
Oh, no.
Paul, hey, Paul, you're about 1 second away from saying goodbye, okay? The fact that you have the right answer doesn't mean you can cut me off. Besides that, most of the time you don't have the right answer. Okay, so in order to get up to $10,000, you would have to buy almost instantly with no advance purchase, right? You'd have to be flying first class, and even then, I think you'd have a hard time getting it up to $10,000. Possible, but not probable. If you were
It
to,
wasn't just a
if
flight,
you
it
were,
was my full trip.
Okay, nice talking to you, Paul. Where was I here? Tina's poisonous resolution. Of course, we start out with, let's see, there was one point here that I wanted to talk about that I didn't pick up on too much the other day. Oh, yeah. Here's a whereas clause. In the recent United States federal court case of Davis versus Guam, the courts have again reaffirmed that while rights provided to Americans under the Constitution do not apply to the native inhabitants of Guam. Okay, once again, Davis versus Guam has reaffirmed that while rights provided to Americans under the Constitution do not apply to the native inhabitants of Guam, they do apply to a certain class which the courts deem favorable to the United States. Now, this is just gibberish. I try hard as I would. I can't make any sense out of this at all. First of all, rights provided to Americans do not apply to the native inhabitants of Guam. You won't find native inhabitants of Guam anywhere except in Tina's imagination. And in local legislation that was crafted after Rice versus Cayetano was decided when they said, well, we can't be as blatantly racist as we were in the beginning. We can't use the word Chamorro. So we got to go to a different definition, native inhabitants. And I said yesterday, had they started out there, they might have had a better chance with the litigation. But they didn't start out there. They started out with Chamorro. And of course, if you were around at that time, you know exactly why. Because it was just the same mindset that causes Lou Leon Guerrero to want to pay RISE Act funds to government employees that never lost a nickel during the pandemic. The same way that the Chamorro, the self-determination was geared towards Chamorros because it was to pander to what politicians at the time thought was their base. But when Rice-Cayetano versus Cayetano came along, they said, no, we'll make this a political definition. And their political definition makes sense. They're talking about people who became United States citizens because of the enactment of the Organic Act of Guam and descendants of those folks. So there were Chamorros living on Guam in 1950 who were already citizens. I think probably Phil Flores' uncle would have been a prime example. I mean, Phil Flores' grandpa would have been a prime example. People who went to the United States, naturalized, etc., married American citizens and were able to naturalize that way, etc. So there were people, Chamorros on Guam, who were Americans when the Organic Act was passed by Congress in 1950. Those people would not be native inhabitants under this political definition that they've now trotted out. So every Chamorro was not a native inhabitant. And the converse is also true. I've told the story about my wife's grandmother, who we always thought, she was the daughter of Marcos Untalan, one of the Ilustrados kicked out of the Philippines, one of the Ilustrados kicked out of the Philippines in the 1860s because they were radicals, Marcos and Casimiro. So we always thought that Marcos came here and married, but he didn't marry Chamorro. He brought his wife with him. So Lou's grandmother was 100% Filipina. But when the Organic Act passed, she became a United States citizen. So that definition makes a certain amount of sense. However, I think the count came out to be like less than 1,000 people, or no, like 100, maybe 150 people were in that category that were not Chamorro but became citizens.
My great-grandfather, my dad's grandfather is Yamanaka.
Okay.
100% Japanese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he would have been, if he were here, born on the island.
Native inhabitant.
He would be a native inhabitant. Yeah. So it made a certain amount of sense to go with that political definition. And had the lawyers been smart enough, there was a section in the Organic Act, as enacted, Section 9A, that said that preference as far as government employment and training should be provided to people of Guamanian ancestry. Yeah. Now, in 1950, Guamanian meant Chamorro. That was the meaning of Chamorro. And I've told this story before. I got just a minute to tell it one more time. But when I first arrived here, almost 60 years ago, and I would hear teachers speaking Chamorro in the teacher's lounge, and I was curious, and I tried to get on the right side of it, tried to pick some of it up. And, one day I said, I hear people say this word Chamorro. And I don't know what that means. What does that word Chamorro mean? And one of the Chamorro ladies says, that's how we say Guamanian in our language. So that's
what a difference a generation makes.
Exactly. So, there's a basis for that argument, but our senators blew it, And now we're down to this crap, resolution. This resolution. Okay, enough for today. We'll be back tomorrow. More tall tales, outlining the latest outrage that our government is perpetrating on us tomorrow or today.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Gas pains continue. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Next is going to be the ATMs. Debit cards, none of that's going to work.
A Virginia resident among hundreds of thousands of people fearing a gasoline shortage from the hacking of the Colonial gas pipeline.
Lines have been reported at gas stations throughout several southeastern states. One man here at the Sheetz gas station in Greensboro told me that several stations were out of gas in Raleigh.
I go on Twitter a lot. I saw online that I think out in the mountains, Charlotte area, they were really having a hard time. So I wanted to make sure I could come out and at least fill my car up.
While some analysts and experts say there is enough gas and shortages right now are due to panic buying, the U.S. EPA has waived some environmental rules on gasoline for a handful of states in order to allow fuel to be sold there. And a statement from the White House says the president is considering whether to waive the Jones Act, allowing foreign tankers and vessels to deliver fuel to some East Coast ports.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency. In the Middle East,
a massive escalation by the factions inside Gaza, who fired dozens of rockets towards Israel's second largest city, Tel Aviv. There were more rockets fired from the Gaza Strip, and we saw different barrages from different areas of Gaza. Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome, was able to intercept a number of these rockets that were fired, but unfortunately, certain rockets impacted areas in central Israel.
Fox's Trey Yingst. The Jerusalem Post reports more than 850 rockets have been launched toward Israel. 5 Israelis have been killed. Palestinian sources say 24 have died in Israeli airstrikes. Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney still defiant, speaking on the House floor yesterday on the eve of a vote by her colleagues to strip her of her GOP congressional leadership job.
We must speak the truth. Our election was not stolen, and America has not failed.